Hello everyone, you are watching a snippet of Countdown April 13th, 2023. Today is Thursday, a bonus story about how a FBK tail is sewn to Tatarsky's mare. Look at Dailymotion, and subscribe to our channel there. See the full version on Patreon. Nervousness in the Kremlin intensifies. This is facilitated by the chatter in the information field, where it is already difficult to distinguish information from a well-presented misinformation. The day before, Ukrainian Prime Minister Shmyhal vaguely stated that Ukraine would launch a counteroffensive when it was ready for it. He also noted that Ukraine's allies do not put pressure on it on the issue of a counteroffensive, and, according to him, it can begin in the summer. And even earlier, Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine Anna Maliar asked to refrain from assessing the readiness of the armed forces of Ukraine and discussing the details of the upcoming counteroffensive. In any case, scraps of information unnerved the Kremlin, the Ministry of Defense and Putin personally. The Crimean beaches have already been dug up, preparing for the landing from the sea, and along the 120-kilometer section in Zaporozhye, the Russians have built 3 lines of defense. At the same time, it is noted that without a sufficient number of troops and artillery support, they will be of little use. That is why Putin gave a tough command to immediately start a massive conscription of two-legged meat. This law on the digitalization of conscripts is about everyone who is subject to conscription for military service, and not just about young conscripts. Not daring to declare martial law, Putin set off a flywheel of conflict with the system, harshly lowering his pants from the deputies and thrusting this 57-page law into an understandable place, which they did not even have time to read, but immediately passed in 3 readings. The head of the State Duma for Defense, Kartopolov, is already ecstatically groaning about the fact that Russia is again ahead of everyone in terms of analogs of legislation. A Just Russia deputy Dmitry Kuznetsov was so frightened that he abstained from voting, that he immediately sprinkled ashes on his head and rushed everywhere to talk about the fact that he actually voted for, and the system counted wrong. In fact, this is an act of rape by Putin of the entire Okhotny Ryad, and at the same time the Ministry of Defense, which will now be completely hated by all the lower layers of the collector. After all, it will not be Putin who will call, but Shoigu and his military commissars. As we expected, for the sake of his own survival, Putin will set everyone up. Either he will force him to hold the occupied territories at the cost of fantastically high losses, or he will have to wet the system itself in the coming weeks. According to rumors, Putin has 2 draft decrees on conscription on his desk. Their difference is only in the age limit. In the first, the decree prescribes to mobilize those liable for military service up to the age of 47, in the second, up to the age of 51. If this is true, and there is almost no doubt about it, then the country will be tightly closed after the next weekend. Who can? He still has a chance to leave the mournful cave of suicides. Officials are already evacuating their children. Some send their offspring to Kazakhstan and Armenia, others to Latin American countries through Turkey. Away from the warring psycho. By the way, it was not without reason that Putin launched a purge in Rostov-on-Don. There, the Moscow FSB, on his orders, staged a demonstrative flogging of the judiciary and the cops, from top to bottom. The Rostov region is one of the most corrupt in the cave, and using the example of a hard cleansing, Putin began to nightmare the system itself, presenting it with the final argument: there are no more untouchables. The slightest suspicion of disloyalty will entail such punishment that it is better to shoot yourself. By the way, they say that Shoigu is not happy with the transfer of arrows of responsibility to his person, so a conflict between him and Putin is also quite possible. No wonder the rat keeps the cannibal cook in the information field. There are no superfluous and random figures left on the Kremlin board. Each plays its role, each is assigned something exclusive. Time plays into Putin's hands. The longer the war lasts, the more chances he has to shake the system and sharpen it for himself, for life. Western agencies and publications, through which narratives about the inevitability of a long war are merged and thrown, are all Putin's special operation to pump up despondency in the camp of Ukrainians. And all these howls of the Kremlin witches can be overturned by only one thing: the beginning of the offensive. After that, completely different processes will start in the Kremlin and the bunker, and the pendulum will swing in the other direction, taking away the sinister initiative from Putin and transferring it to the system, which will definitely not spare the bald man. First, a war of all against all will begin in the corridors of the Kremlin, and only then it will be extrapolated to the entire cave. And then it burns up, even hotter than the farmers' market in Khimki. What practically, and there is Moscow. Become our patrons now and look further in this program. Poland in the near future can become a serious base in the matter of resistance to Rashism throughout the European space. Abrams will be repaired here and the same shells with a depleted uranium core will be produced for them. The UK continues to expand its sanctions lists. This time, relatives of Putin's oligarchs, and not only them, fell under the freezing of assets and property. And Russian tax residents in Europe will soon have fun times too. The FSB is investigating the liquidation of the propagandist Fomin and is reporting on progress in the investigation. And it was decided to use the FSB condom for the second time. Today it was especially alarming in the suburbs. There was something clapping. Repeatedly. Claps were heard in Kashira, Stupino, and Kaluga. And while the Ministry of Emergency Situations kept silent, the head of Kashira near Moscow, Cannon, hastened to reassure that these pops are cute pranks of hypersonic aviation. And that is all. See the full version on Patreon. And thanks to everyone who is becoming our patrons right now. I hugged everyone. Meet tomorrow on Friday Live. Glory to Ukraine.